Hello, everyone. This is another Freedom to Feel conversation, and my guest today is Julia Shay. She is an accredited social worker with over 15 years of experience, having worked in diverse settings such as nonprofit organizations and employee assistance programs. As an attachment focused counselor, Julia has a deep understanding of core issues and childhood trauma, providing genuine engagement and presence to help clients navigate challenges that affect all areas of their lives. So, this is my brief introduction to you, Julia. Very brief, the full bio will be at the end. The question that I always ask everyone when I meet them after the brief introduction, because of it might be because of my curiosity, also my uh, uh, spiritual interest. So I always ask this question about identity. How would you introduce yourself? Who is Julia in this very moment?
Wow, that's a pretty awesome question. How would I identify myself? I
Yeah.
think very spiritual person also. And I love the integration of the spiritual and the psychological
Mm,
to really make sense of our reality and problems we face as human beings. And it's really amazing, I think, for meaning making, which I think is such an intrinsic part of being human.
mm.
So, yeah, I think that's how I describe myself at present.
Yes, beautiful. So we did talk briefly about spirituality, but not. I didn't ask you about what is your view. Like, do you have what? How do you see yourself, the world at large, others, and this reality? Do you have a specific view, understanding of all this?
Well, as a couples counselor and relationship focused counselor, I definitely feel very strongly that relationships are, a very important part of our healing and transformation process.
Mm, yes.
So, I think that there is actually possibly a grand design as to why we
Yeah.
tend to pair up in intimate partnerships, particularly romantic relationships. Sometimes friendships and family relationships too. But
Right.
I guess my focus is mostly on romantic connections.
Yeah.
And I do think it's within the dynamics of a romantic,
Mm,
intimate partnership where so much is at stake and we're
mm,
trying to
mm,
build
mm.
a loving, secure connection with another human being,
Right.
that we can sort of find so much
Uh,
wisdom in the triggers that come up and the dynamics that play out with the other person. And I really believe that it's a very sacred mirror, if you will,
mm,
to show us, where our, I guess, our wounds are, where we sort of, have areas that we may need to work on. And I guess ultimately it's about clearing all the blockages so we can be free to love and be loved. So,
yes.
yeah.
Uh, so true. And what a perfect environment, you're right, to grow when it comes to
Mm.
transformation. You said that beautifully too, the way you write. You said, I'll read this now. You say, intimate partnerships are not just about love and companionship. They can be the sacred grounds for transformation, healing, and deep inner evolution. That's
Mm.
true because then in a way, it's almost like we have. I wouldn't want to say use the word forced, but we feel in a way more compelled to change, to grow, to kind of
Yeah.
accommodate that feeling or the
Mm.
concept, right, of what we call love. Um, how would you describe this or define even what love is?
It's a very good question. And I'm sure if you ask different people, they would probably give you a different answer. But I guess for me, it goes beyond the construct that I think most people are familiar with, which is romantic love.
Yeah,
That's one form of love,
yeah,
but I think that there are so many more forms of love. It's so expansive,
right.
and I guess it's really hard to kind of put into language, really. It's
Mm,
just a all expansive
yeah.
sense of being connected to oneself and the
Mm,
cosmos and the
mm,
collective.
mm,
And you just, I think a core tenet really is self love, which is, again, hard to describe, but I think it's a lot to do with self compassion, self empathy, self commitment,
mm,
confidence, all of those sort of things.
yeah.
So yeah, it's an all expansive, beautiful,
Mm.
loving energy, so to speak.
Mhm. Yeah, it is. So it's something that I ask a lot of people. I used to ask that question a lot, like, what is love? And then at the end, I used to say,
Mm,
ask the question, what's the purpose of the human experience? And that
mm.
would come up a lot, love. And then, what three experiences do you wish everyone to have before they die? And then I heard love. It comes up over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
It's very I think within the human experience, yes, it might be the only reason really to evolve, right? To get to that point of love, in a sense, would mean harmony, feeling connected to everything
Mm.
and everyone, interconnected, almost
Yeah.
like you are part of me and part of. There's no separation. We cannot separate because the ground is the same. The essence is one, is the same.
Yep.
Um,
Absolutely.
so I think it has something to do with that. Do you feel like that this is where we are heading in a way when it comes to evolution to get to that
I hope
understanding?
so.
Me
I think we are
too.
very slowly. I mean, I suspect, like, a lot of people have commented since 2020, it's almost like we're going through
Mm,
a collective,
yeah.
human dark night of the soul,
Yes.
and that's an essential part of the process in order
Yeah.
to actually, break free of, I guess you would say, the matrix, or
Mm,
the
yeah.
way we've been sort of conditioned to view life, love, and the universe, and how we do things on this planet.
Yes.
And in order to embrace new possibilities and truly go down that path,
Mm,
the old needs to sort of break down and diminish first.
right.
And I feel like we're in a collective process of that at the moment. And I think on a micro level, bringing it back to relationships for a minute,
Yeah.
that's what's happening for a lot of people in their intimate
Mm,
relationships.
mm,
There's either,
yeah.
I guess, working on triggers and breaking old paradigms and breaking relational patterns,
Yeah.
or perhaps there's a sense that maybe this relationship, isn't actually for my highest good.
Mm,
It isn't actually for my benefit, and therefore the relationship starts to break down.
right.
Which is obviously sad on a human level and
Yeah.
can bring a lot of grief, but it's also an essential part of the process, I think, to move forward.
Yes.
Yeah.
And your beautiful job is to make the transition easier, right, Julia? Is that how you
Yeah.
see yourself in
I
the
think
midst of
so.
this?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's about helping couples understand, what is sort of a secure attachment, which is based
Mm,
on attachment theory, attachment styles, which is more going into, obviously, the field of, psychology and, that sort of thing. But I think that, if you were talking about it in spiritual terms, absolutely, it's about looking at the self,
mm,
you know, and helping each other grow in the best way possible.
mm,
But first, you have to go through the transformation,
yeah,
and our partner becomes our mirror and shows us, I guess, some of our less desirable traits and sides.
right.
But it's not done out of malice.
Mm,
It's obviously
mm,
there are examples where that might be the case, but I guess I'm talking about, for most people, it's a beautiful opportunity. It's a mirror to
mm,
really see yourself in all shades of grey, the
yeah,
good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between,
yes.
and then have an opportunity to address those things and heal together.
Mm,
So I think yeah,
mm.
it's part of my
Wow.
vision.
Yeah, I love that vision of healing together. kind of, it's almost like this a partnership with life itself, isn't it? Just
Yeah,
returning to
absolutely.
that harmony, that balance again. So the title is, you already mentioned, so relationships as a mirror, a pathway to healing, self growth, and personal transformation. Um, you just mentioned that some of these patterns, in relationships, that they might be a mirror, but sometimes some of those patterns are not. So I'd love to for you to kind of clarify that a bit. Like, what are some examples of that? What is a good example of something that will be the that's easily identified as a mirror, and behaviors
Mm,
and patterns that are not?
okay. I guess, you know, mirrors in relationships might work in a myriad of different ways. And in couples counselling, we do tend to, as I said, focus on attachment, and different attachment styles that come with that.
Yeah.
So what often does happen in difficult couple dynamics is what's called the pursuer withdrawer dance.
Mm,
So
yeah.
that's
Okay.
basically perhaps where one partner is more of the pursuer in the relationship,
Yeah.
is perhaps a little bit more anxious and is wanting to, when there are issues and troubles that come up in the relationship, they're very much about going towards the problem, towards their partner to try and
Mm,
resolve it, to really put that anxiety at bay. Whereas withdrawers tend to perhaps, I mean, not all, but everyone's different, but
yeah.
generally speaking, tend to perhaps maybe shy away from intense emotional sort of discussions and
Right.
may need a bit more time to reflect and process to understand their thoughts and feelings. And so I guess, just to sort of go back to your question, the withdrawer pursuer dance, in terms of one person perhaps pursuing conflict resolution and more connection, more intimacy, all those sort of
Mm,
things, and the other person maybe at times sort of withdrawing from that, in various different ways.
yeah.
This is a very dynamic mirror, because I think,
Mm,
often for perhaps the person on the more anxious side, I mean, this is just a very general, broad example.
yeah.
The fact that their partner might be sort of saying, "Hey, let's just let's just chill for a minute. Let's just put this on pause. We don't have to actually resolve every single problem right now. Let's take a
Mm,
breather, a breath, and think about it, and come back when we're ready. And our
yeah.
nervous systems aren't all dysregulated and
Yeah.
supercharged, and all of those things."
Yeah.
So that's a very good lesson for the more anxious partner, is it sort of says, okay, well, you need to learn perhaps
Mm,
self-soothing techniques, and
mm,
also to how to perhaps put a pause on things and manage some of that anxiety and those expectations.
mm,
And
yeah.
then for the other partner, the lesson may be something like, well, it's safe to actually express and feel, and come to the table a bit more and discuss things more openly, and
Right.
um, and be a bit more vulnerable. So
Right.
I guess that's sort
Yeah.
of a very typical example that ends up in the counselling room.
Yeah.
And then in terms of when perhaps relationships aren't a mirror, that's I guess more getting into the realm of abusive relationships,
Yeah.
where there is coercive
Yeah.
power and control issues
Yeah.
present. I mean, that could still be in some ways seen as a mirror,
Yeah.
but it's definitely not a helpful healing mirror. It's more of a damaging
Yes.
mirror, that's ultimately something that can take a lot of time to heal from afterwards. So
Mm.
best to try and extract oneself from those kind of relationships, if and when safe to do so.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That. Thank you for the clarity. That's very clear to me. And when I heard that some women, and perhaps men too, they don't leave abusive relationship, it's really hard for them. And some of them just stay for the rest of their lives. it kind of shocked
Mm.
me when I read or somebody told me that. So and you just mentioned now leave when it's safe. So
Yeah.
yeah, talk to me for a moment about that. I know that this might not be exactly what you deal with, right? This is not really a typical client of
Mm.
abusive relationship, physical especially. But what is the is the safety the main reason why people stay in abusive relationships? Fear of
Yeah, I think fear is a big factor, but it's quite. I think it's quite complex. You know,
yeah,
the dynamics, and I'm just trying to think of a good example in terms of the safety aspect.
yeah,
Because if you picture a relationship, whether it be a female or a male who's in a relationship with someone who is very controlling,
yeah,
the person who is very controlling may be may sort of threaten to perhaps ridicule or um, physically abuse or financially abuse their
mm,
partner if there's a separation, or they might use quite underhanded, manipulative sort of
right,
emotional tactics as well,
right,
to coerce the person to not leave.
yeah,
um, and so then it becomes this vicious cycle that's
yeah,
very, very difficult, I think, for people to escape from. And meanwhile, there's also often a lot of shame associated with
uh,
being in a relationship like that, and perhaps a lot of
mm,
pressure to um,
mm,
present a very positive, rosy
yeah,
view of what the relationship's like,
yeah,
to friends and family and to the public.
right,
So that can be another element. So but I think it's a very complicated area that we probably don't know enough about,
right,
particularly in psychology. But there's a lot of emerging research and a lot of really good books
right,
that go into more detail about
yeah,
the power and control tactics that are used. So
right.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Especially when you say that's a very complex, yeah, situation.
Yeah.
Because yeah, it's yeah, I don't really, I think I should not even ask more questions about that. But I do wanted to ask you a question about that would be almost like for the end of the conversation, but it just came to me now. What would be, from your perspective, your professional and personal perspective, the a model of a healthy relationship? What's the closest that we can get to that?
I think that that's really talking about secure attachment, essentially, at the end of the day,
Right.
which basically means that both partners feel that their partner is on their side, that they can turn to their partner if they're having
Mm,
issues, problems, they want to raise something that's bothering them,
yeah.
and that their partner is going to be receptive to that, and
Mm,
perhaps not become
yeah.
defensive or angry or
Mm,
withdraw from them.
right.
Of course, we all lead stressful lives, and so sometimes, there might be a situation, even in a really healthy relationship, where one partner wants to address something with the other, and the other has just gotten home from work and they're stressed and tired, and they might
Yeah.
accidentally snap and say, I don't want to talk about this, or
Yeah.
that kind of thing, and there's a tense moment. But the hallmark of a healthy relationship in that instance is the ability to say, okay, we're both just tired. It's
Mm,
all right. Let's just,
mm,
put this on the shelf for a couple of hours or until tomorrow, and we'll bring it up then and resolve it then.
yeah.
So there's sort of a level of, I
Mm,
guess you could call it,
mm,
emotional safety
yeah.
around being able to address things, and just also a sense that
Mm,
you don't have any doubt that that person loves you, and that they're in your corner, and
mm,
you know that they want to be with you. And of course, again, we all have
yeah.
days where perhaps we might be a bit more fragile due to all
Yes.
sorts of
Yes.
external factors, and that's very normal and human. But
Yes.
it's this general overall sense
Wow.
of this person has my back.
Yeah.
you know they love me, they're here for me, I'm here for them.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
That really, yeah, that's, and then you speak a lot about emotional safety. Yeah, feeling
Mm.
like you can say anything. That's something that it seems like the world that's not really ready for it. You see, with
Oh,
most people, you can't really have an open conversation and kind of say not even your truth, let alone some universal truth. Some people are not even
mm.
open to that, and they will become defensive. I think there's a lot to do with
Yeah.
emotional safety or emotional being emotionally healthy. A lot to do with being open too, isn't it? It's a form of
Absolutely.
intelligence that you just
Yeah.
open and you don't have to agree, but there's this sense of lightness where you can almost like you
Mm.
have enough space within yourself to dance around, any topics or anything without getting defensive or getting angry or anything like that. It's really beautiful
Absolutely.
to see when you meet people like that. But it's not
Yeah.
so common though. I don't know. Is that do you find it to be common actually that you find people that are open that you can
Mm.
talk about pretty much anything, politics, religion, you name it, and they are just cool about it?
Well, I mean, I think that because I am actually working mostly with people who are
Mm,
experiencing a lot of distress in their
yeah.
relationships. Perhaps when they first come in, I'm not seeing that so much,
Mm,
which is
yeah.
understandable
Right.
because
Right.
they're potentially in a lot of crisis,
Right.
and so that those higher abilities or that those higher functions are not really
Mm,
present or happening.
mm,
But with time and security and persistence and all of those things through the process of therapy, that the ability for that to happen starts to perhaps emerge a bit more, I think.
right.
So I think it's a very, I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I think it's a very important process. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
but I mean, just zooming out, probably on a macro level,
Mm,
I'd say maybe it's probably a rare quality.
yeah. I agree.
I'm curious. So
Mm.
do you have some thoughts around that as well?
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's rare. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah,
That's why I have the podcast. That's the way. That was my way of having these conversations. So we could just talk,
yeah,
and we could just talk about anything, pretty much. Although we don't bring politics or religion, spirituality. Yes, even I speak to a lot of religious people, but
okay,
we get along. It's really beautiful. Yeah, they're open to the my form of spirituality, which is a lot more open than
yeah,
the religious way. But yeah, it's rare. It's rare, and I have to say, it has to do with healing, right, Julia? That's
mm,
something that trauma gets in the way. We have so much blocks. It's almost like it feels to me like we are born to be open, to be natural. Basically, that's what nature is all
mm,
about. It's always open to to the floods, to the what do you call it, hurricanes. You see, the trees are not really, nature is not really complaining. It's basically just surrendering itself to it and just kind of
yeah,
flowing with whatever is happening. And I really
absolutely,
believe, if it is a belief system, that we are born the same way, but then somehow we lost the way. We've forgotten to be natural, and
mm,
we became quite unnatural in a sense of almost hitting the brakes every time something appears that pushing away things that we don't like, and running after the things that are pleasing, and that has caused a lot of problems like addiction, as you
yeah.
know.
It's complex, isn't it?
Yes, it
Yeah,
is, very much is. So I love your work. I mean, I meet so many therapists, and they all have a particular kind of challenges that they address. So the
yeah,
relationship one is one of, I have to say, is one of my favorites. Although I don't interview too many people about relationships, but it's really because it's very important. I guess it's important to me. I love this sense of connectivity, feeling connected to others in the sense that we are
mm,
talking about here, that
yeah,
we are open and we are almost like childlike in a way, that innocence of rather being receptive. Oh, if you say something that felt like it was let's say that I don't feel it kind of fits within my idea of the world, but I'm still open to hear why do you have that view of life, I'm still
Mm,
curious, and there's, like I said, lightness to it. But I
yeah.
see within my own community here, in my family members, that this is not really the case. So everybody's so
Uh,
tight around everything, some topics. And God forbid, you cannot talk about too much about identity too. If you touch on any of the
mm,
belief systems, then it almost becomes an instant kind of conflict. And yeah,
mm,
it saddens me, I have to say, because it's something that I live for, like being just being free in a sense of let's just play with this, with this gift of language in expression
yeah.
in a human experience. It just but it's not. I just found out early on, pretty quick, that it was it would cause unnecessary suffering. I guess I stopped for a while
Oh,
by being too
yeah.
honest and too open and all those things. It got me in a lot of trouble. You have
Yeah.
no idea.
Oh
So, but
gosh.
oh yes. Talk to me about, something that you said is very interesting. You talk about the misconceptions about the conditioning and misconceptions about love, right? About the romantic love, the Hollywood
Mm,
portraits and all that, the movies. And then you talk about the stages of
mm.
love. And then you talked about hormones, oxytocin and
Yeah.
dopamine. So I'd love to hear from you. Yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be nice to share this about the stages
Sure.
of love.
Yeah, the stages of love. Yeah. So just briefly going back to that notion that,
Mm,
we're kind of conditioned, I think, in society to think of love as being just one form, which is romantic love, which is
right.
then,
Yes.
I guess, all across Hollywood movies, all of those things. Um, but I mean, I guess in reality, most of us discover that it's quite different to that.
Mm,
And we do go through different stages in the intimate relationship. So, and I think that's personally, Mother Nature's
mm,
crafty design, really, to get us to do the work. Well, that's the
right.
intention anyway.
Yeah.
So, we all know that lovely feeling when we meet somebody new and it's exciting and they're attractive and
Yeah.
they find us attractive and the communication just, flows effortlessly,
Yeah.
and the hormones are flying around, like you mentioned before. The
Yes.
good old love hormone, oxytocin, dopamine is
Yeah.
the feel-good drug in the brain.
Right.
It's being released in full force, and
Mm,
that's most people know of that stage as being called the honeymoon period.
yeah.
In I
Uh,
guess in a more scientific term, it's called limerence.
uh,
So that's that initial stage when we meet someone, which I think lasts probably about 3 to 6 months on average,
yeah.
maybe
Not that long.
sometimes less or more,
Right.
depending on your situation.
Right.
And then the oxytocin and the dopamine start to wear away, and
Yes.
suddenly we're looking at somebody, who has warts
Mm,
and all.
mhm.
We're not just seeing them as this, amazing soulmate that has no flaws, that is our perfect other person, that could never do wrong. We're
Right.
suddenly seeing, maybe I don't like, the fact that
Mm,
there's
mm,
there's some argumentative behavior, or maybe I don't like the fact that
mm.
our values suddenly don't seem to align.
Right.
Maybe I'm feeling like this person may not be the person after all. Can I really trust them? Do they have my back? And so that's sort of more the trust building phase, where we
Right.
start to see everything about the person. We start to ask ourselves, is this the person for me? Can
Right.
I trust them? Are they on my same team? All of those things.
Right.
And that's usually also when patterns start to develop, like the good old pursuer withdrawer dance that I talked about before.
Yes. Yeah.
Those patterns usually start to emerge at that time.
Right.
Maybe a bit later or maybe sooner even, but usually around that time. And I think majority of people start to think perhaps there's something wrong with the relationship, or this isn't meant to be,
Right.
when I would very strongly suggest it's actually a guidance signal. It's saying, hey,
Mm,
these are your unmet needs. These are your wounds. These are your fears being reflected in the behavior of the other person and vice versa.
Mm.
And so let's hunker down and really understand this, and let's really track it and work on it, and perhaps take it to counselling or take it to, I guess a guru or a self-help,
Mm. Yeah.
environment, and
Yeah.
whatever works for you, and really, see what we can learn and heal from this process.
Right.
And so that's why I think ultimately it's a gift, an amazing gift for personal power and transformation. And then ultimately, you're doing it with somebody as well, in tandem.
Yeah.
And I think that that's probably one of the most beautiful things, is to
Mm.
heal in partnership with
Yes.
somebody that you love.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
what's more amazing than that?
Mm. You're right. Yeah. It sounds very sacred as you use that word. It's almost like I think you mentioned also off record, I believe, like a design, almost a divine plan, some sort of
Mm,
plan, some sort
yeah.
of design, right? That's putting people together that are quite the opposite, so they can
Yeah,
help each other to grow.
absolutely.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I can't.
Very
Yeah.
crafty, clever plan, Mother Nature, I think.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. Like it just made me reflect about this idea of nature
Ah,
and the spirit,
yeah.
because some people, like the tradition that I studied recently for the last 10 years, it's Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta is non-duality. So it's basically they focus a lot more on awareness and pure consciousness, which is
Yeah.
not really, it kind of addresses nature as a realm of not even a learning school, like some people say, evolution and all that we're speaking here, but
Mm,
almost like an illusory kind of reality that we have created with our minds. The mind had creates all this, so we are just not in
yeah.
a very illusory playground. So, but that's the perspective of Vedanta. That's where my studies, that's my practice really. But then there's something about in the end, of course, every is one only. The essence is one, so that's why it's non-duality. There's no second. Everything is one reality.
Mm,
But there's something about when you speak about nature, almost like playing the game, of almost helping us to wake up from that dream, from that illusion that we are separate from one
yeah.
another, that we are not, that we are supposed to be fighting for everything, and
Mm,
suffering, and just go throughout this human experience suffering unnecessarily, and in this very almost like a miserable dance, which is not a good
oh,
place to be. I have been there for so many years. That is,
yeah.
yeah, it's not a good one, a good place to
Mm,
be. And yeah, so I feel like that makes sense, Julia. It's almost like nature is, yeah, helping us to see the truth. So even everything is kind of designed to our relationships, our own bodies that one day will die
mm,
anyway. So everything is transient in passing. And it really screams, that what you just said of is trying to tell us something, is trying to help us to get somewhere. And that is the truth, to see
yeah.
reality for what it is, which everything is very much
Mm,
connected and we can never be separate from it. Um,
mhm.
Gosh, but that's another conversation for another podcast interview. Non-duality and psychology and nature and all that. But going
Yeah.
back to, so what is the process like when you helping couples to understand this what you call
Mm,
golden opportunity in a relationship?
mm.
So what are the specific practices that you suggest them to engage with?
Oh,
Meditation?
sure.
Yeah, I would love to hear a bit more
Yeah.
about practices.
So I use a type of therapy called emotionally focused therapy,
Mm,
specifically for couples,
yeah.
and really that involves three specific stages. And so it's quite structured, but it's also unstructured at the same time,
Mm,
which is very interesting. So,
right.
and also very complex, but also simple at the same time.
Ah,
So stage one, obviously is when couples do come into counselling. for the first time. And that largely involves what we call tracking the negative cycle. So that means that
Yeah.
as a therapist, I'm asking the couple to recall a particular fight that keeps happening in their relationship.
Right.
And then we break it down and we really track every single bit of that fight and what happens. Because what couples often report, and this is what the model is based on,
Right.
is that there's a repeated cycle of interaction that's quite negative and distressing for both partners.
Right.
And that it may, the initial starting point or the catalyst for the fight might change, from occasion to occasion, as in, it might be about the bins, or it might be about going to see friends on the weekend or family, but it follows the same pattern every time
Yeah.
in terms of how the couple responds to each other, how they react to each other's defenses and self-protective mechanisms.
Right.
So that's very much ties in with what I was talking about before, about the pursuer withdrawer
Yeah.
dance, so to
Yeah.
speak. So
Yeah.
that's one example of that dynamic or that pattern playing out.
Right.
So we really, in the first stage of couples counselling, we really seek to help couples understand what their cycle is,
Right.
so they can actually become a lot more aware of it consciously, because often it sort of has a life of its own and just plays out very instinctively.
Right.
Because when people are triggered,
Yeah.
it's very, very hard to think very rationally and put a stop to things, essentially.
Right.
So that's a lot of couples therapy with the emotionally focused therapy model is about tracking that negative cycle. And then the second stage is really about deepening communication and connection.
Oh, yeah.
And that sort of follows into the third stage, really.
Right.
So, yeah, it has a very sort of specific structure and aim. And that's essentially what I'm doing with most couples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it just it resonates. Everything resonates very much with me. The whole process, in a way. Of course, you have to know the cause, right? The roots, like how
Mm.
this pattern kind of progresses and how it
Yeah.
evolves, and how in what situations it keep happening. And you know what? And then I love what you said. That's complex and simple at the same time. So
Mm.
it's not linear too, or it can be structured. So it's very flexible. It's not fixed in
Hmm.
any way, and that's reflects our lives, right? Life, it's not fixed. It's very
Yeah,
dynamic. Everything.
that's it. Exactly.
So one of the things that I want to ask you that I'm curious about it is I have heard before, I mean so many times, about this idea of loving somebody and liking somebody. So liking the
Mm.
person that you're with, and some people believe that actually liking your partner is actually as important as loving them. How
Mm.
do you
Mhm.
see that, these two concepts of love and like in
Oh,
relationships?
that's interesting. Um, yeah, I guess in terms of the sort of work that I do, um, I think it's important to have a very, very strong friendship with your
Mm,
partner, which is
yeah.
probably most likely where the like comes in,
Yes.
because, like you said, you do hear people say, I love you, but I don't like you.
Yes.
Which
Yes.
is, it's a difficult thing to hear and it's a difficult thing to say. But for
Yeah.
me, it sounds like they're saying,
Mm,
I still have a lot of romantic feelings for you, but maybe the friendship isn't as solid.
yeah.
And a lot of studies have been done to show that the best relationships, or the most sort of successful relationships, if you will, they're
Yeah.
based on very, very strong friendship, but also, and this is this is going to sound a little bit more adult only, but it's part of relationships. So good friendship, but also good sex life. So
That
you know,
too.
good
Yeah.
sexual connection, good physical connection.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I guess if you if you don't have that component, not that it's the be all and end all, but if you don't really have that component, then it's, I guess it's more of a platonic connection, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, right. So it is like um, what we are trying to do. It seems to me is address all aspects, right, of a relationship. It goes back to the concept of wholeness, perhaps, right, Julia?
Mm.
Like having a relationship that's holistic. So we are just always taking care of all parts of it. For
Yeah.
me, the most important part has been the spiritual part of it. It feels to me like it's the most important. I never
Mm.
had, I think, a partner because I was married 3 times. That's my third marriage. So I don't
Mhm.
think I ever had that spiritual connection that was, that was fulfilling, that I really felt like, oh,
Mm.
this is great. So has been always because perhaps because of my interest in spirituality. So I always
Yeah.
kind of for some reason, maybe my relationships they became what you described. We've been talking about that mirror one, that's trying to tell me
Mm.
where the place that I need to heal in order to grow and evolve. So I kind of said yes to all of them, and of course two of them ended. But
Mm.
yeah, I don't know. It's interesting that you said the sexual part, right? That's a more physical thing. I feel like the body needs that connection,
Mhm.
right? So it's very much part of it. But for me, has not been sexual. It's been more like touching, hugging, almost like
Yeah.
but not really intercourse, all that. I mean, it's good too when it happens, but it's not really
Mm.
yeah, it just made me reflect on that, authentically here now. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, is that normal?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, and I was gonna add to that,
Yeah.
when I talk about sex and physical intimacy, that includes all the things you just said,
Yeah.
hugging and closeness and,
Yes.
the power of a hug, I think, is incredible. There's
Yeah.
lots of
Yeah.
beautiful hormones that get released
Mm,
during a hug.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
oxytocin again.
Right.
It's a very bonding, it's a
Yeah.
very bonding thing to do, and it actually makes us feel safe and secure in the world if
Mm,
we're having regular hugs with somebody that we are bonded to and attached to and have a safe connection with,
yeah.
that we feel has our back. It's
Mm,
very it actually makes a huge difference, I think, in terms of our sense of being okay in the world and feeling confident to go out there and do what we need to do, and then come home and
mm,
be sort of safe
yeah.
and vulnerable with the person that we trust the most.
Right.
So,
Yes. Yeah. Thank
yeah.
you for saying that. So it is, yeah, the hug, the touch, but not, I'm not
Yeah.
mainly not interested. Um, what about love and fear? I have heard that we are driven by these two different emotions, right? Or
Mm.
ground of reality per se. Love, fear. Is that how you see it too? Like everything we do, the decisions we make,
Mm.
partners we choose, they are either coming from fear or love. Is that?
Yeah, I see, definitely. There's a lot that I would take from that, for sure, in terms of the work that I do and just how I see things. I think with relationships, people can definitely be very much motivated, or rather controlled, by fear
Mm,
in a lot of ways.
yeah.
And so,
Mm,
there's nothing more scary than becoming close to someone
mm,
and letting your guard down and being vulnerable and allowing them into your world in a very intimate way.
right.
And, that in itself, I think, can create a lot of fear.
Right.
But also, it brings up fear from the past as well, past triggers, past traumas, past
Right.
wounds when it comes to being loved or not being loved,
Yeah.
or, any kind of difficulty or trauma when it comes to, feeling safe.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, and love, of course, is the motivator. It's a
Mm,
huge motivator.
yeah,
So,
it is. It's beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah, it is. Um, Guys, something that you just said caught my attention.
Mm.
You said controlled by fear. So it's not really that we are being driven. We are choosing, consciously choosing to
Mm.
choose, fearful patterns, or fearful anything. We're controlled by it. That's interesting.
Mm.
Said that way. Ha.
Yeah.
Huh. That almost like we feel like it's a choiceless choice. We just make it's a very unconscious, subconscious. Some people say that it's coming from the subconscious mind, and we are just making
Mm.
decisions without even analyzing them, and
Absolutely.
that
I
makes
mean,
sense.
this is going to sound very scientific for a minute, but I think a lot of people are quite familiar with the what I call the animal brain,
Mm,
which is technically called the amygdala, and
yeah,
that's responsible for when we feel frightened and we have the urge to run or we have the urge to fight.
yeah,
That's that part of the brain gets activated, and that's the
right,
same part that gets activated during romantic relationships when we're having trouble and we're in conflict with our partner and we don't feel like our partner understands us, or we feel emotionally unsafe. And then it's a very automatic, instinctual, raw, animalistic kind of process that takes over, that
right,
we don't feel like we have control. We are in the animal brain. It's
yeah,
dictating us, or what some people might refer to as being triggered. And it's very difficult to have a meaningful conversation that where the more rational part of the brain is able to come
mm,
to the table
yeah.
and help us make good decisions and have good conversations to resolve it.
Oh yeah,
It's that capacity is completely shut down during those moments.
that's amazing.
So in that sense, it does feel like we're being controlled by it,
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Gosh, yeah, that's so true. Because it just reminded me of some, a simple thing. I always meditate. At nighttime. I'm always
Mm.
the nighttime in when I wake up. So morning in the evening. And I
Mm.
always, 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 always try to keep in mind not to react when my husband is my biggest let's say teacher when it comes to triggers. So in the
Yeah.
mirror relationship, so I'm like, okay, when he gets upset, whatever it is, I will just stay cool and just go within. Always stay centered,
Mm.
so I don't just respond to, I don't react to it. And it rarely happens. I get it's almost like it loses it's funny because it's a practice that I've been trying to apply for so long, and it's so tough.
Wow.
And I wonder why it's so difficult. Um, and sometimes I think I got it. Okay, I did much better
Yeah.
here. But then, like, no, 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 I still, talked up or should have stayed quiet without any shame or any guilt or anything. No, no, I'm not kind of judging myself or anything. That doesn't
Mm.
happen, which is great. But there is something about it's almost like gets frustrating at some point where what about my practice? And I've been trying to apply these things. I've been practicing for so
Mm.
long, and I'm still falling for, getting almost like a magnet. It's like a magnetic field that
Yeah.
that you have flies that loves the light, and they're always coming too close, and then they get burned. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it feels just like that, exactly like that for me.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
advice would you give to people like me that's
Uh,
always, yeah, do we get away? Sometimes I even thought about just ending the relationship.
mm.
Just that's
Oh,
how,
that's really tough.
yeah,
Yeah.
because it's tough for me not to respond, although
Oh,
I try.
yeah, absolutely. And I would, first of all, I would say, to yourself and also anyone, including myself as well at times, because we're all human,
Right,
um, that, when you find yourself reacting in the same way and you can't control those responses and you feel like you're just in this reactive, what they call the reactive cycle with your
yeah,
partner,
yeah,
you feel like, oh gosh, we're failing, we can't do
right,
relationships, this is terrible. I
yes.
think that's really, in a way, it's quite normal,
Mhm.
And but at the same time, I think that we can learn healthier ways of fighting. if that makes sense, which I know
Mm,
it sounds like a very strange concept, but I think that
yeah,
relationships,
yeah,
put us in such a vulnerable place. And,
yes,
it's about our sense of being lovable in this world. And there's so much at stake with those intimate
yeah,
relationships. It's
yeah,
about our sense of who we are as a person, and our self-worth too. So makes sense, really, that we get into these very difficult cycles with each other. And we really struggle to sort of get out of them.
yeah,
But like I was saying, there are healthy ways of fighting, so to speak.
yeah,
And then there are ways that I guess I would just classify them as very reactive, and
yes.
perhaps even at times maybe explosive or damaging.
Mm,
So the trick is to learn that most likely your partner is going to be your opposite and very different to
mm,
you.
yeah,
And there is just so much benefit to that. But then, when we get into conflict with each other, it does feel very threatening.
yes.
So I guess we have to remember that
Ah,
they're just coming from their place of reference. We're coming from our place of reference.
yeah, yeah,
And if it's really kind of getting out of control, I would really highly recommend couples counselling,
yeah,
particularly emotionally focused therapy for
right.
anybody. I
Mm,
think it's a very incredibly invaluable process
mm,
for anyone to sort of go through if they're really struggling. Because
yeah,
at the end of the day, I don't think that there's anything about relationships that is inherently bad.
mm,
I think that relationships are pure and beautiful. It's
mm,
it's more about the fact that the negative cycle takes over. So the
yeah,
cycle becomes the problem in the
right.
relationship, not the relationship itself.
Ah,
So yeah, I
yeah,
hope that sort of makes sense. It's quite
it does.
complex.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it. The cycle of yeah, of that negativity. It's definitely a pattern. Yeah, that it's exactly
Hmm.
that. And keeps repeating
Yeah.
itself. And then you don't both of us
Yep.
just get we got used to it. We just keep kind of dancing. It's a dance, and you
It
call
is
it
a
a
dance.
dance. That's interesting. I love using the metaphor for
Yeah.
other things, but yeah, it is a dance. Interesting dance.
Yeah.
And you also mentioned about you said about ultimately, you're right. Our closest relationships offer us the richest access to our shadow. So our shadow side,
Yeah.
the parts of ourselves we have hidden, denied, and buried.
Yeah.
Right. That's avoidance, right? So yeah, that's interesting. I see that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
see that.
It's not easy to look at our shadow.
Yeah, right. Like I don't like when he gets angry. So anger
Yeah.
is like an emotion that I'm not yet. I have a hard time kind of being
Yeah.
befriending anger. And
Yeah.
maybe that's the reason he gets angry too quick, in my opinion. And
Oh,
too quick,
yeah.
for too long, and too
Mhm.
often. Three things.
Yeah.
So around that feeling of anger, that might be that, Julia, that yeah, there's a part of me that pushes away the feeling of anger, and that he represents
Yeah.
that to me in a way. Maybe that's why we are together. Who knows?
Yeah.
Talk to me for a moment about that. I know we're almost at the end, but gosh, it's been amazing talking to you. I could be here forever.
Yeah.
I lost track of time too. So, but yeah, talk to me for a moment about the shadow side of it. And
Shadow side. Yeah. So I guess that's probably bringing in more of the spiritual lens
mm,
and sort of looking at the shadow, which is, I think, originally a concept that was very much from Carl Jung, the famous psychoanalyst. So, shadow is the parts of ourselves, like you were just saying, that are disowned, that we find too shameful or
mm,
difficult to look at.
yeah,
It might be things like jealousy and anger and rage and
yeah,
hurt, and all of those things that
yeah,
perhaps we wish we didn't have. Ways of
mm,
responding to triggers that we wish we didn't have,
right.
parts of our personality and behavior that we just want to deny.
Right.
But that's unfortunately only going to lead to us
Mm.
sort of repressing those things, and perhaps they're going to come out in other ways anyway. That's going to be
Right.
quite, difficult or destructive even. So,
Yeah.
in order to really heal, I think it's very important
Wow.
using the mirror lens of
Yeah.
the relationship
Yeah.
to look at what's being mirrored to you in terms of those shadow traits. If your partner says, "Oh gosh, I really struggle with the fact that you're so judgmental all the time." You might really struggle to hear that, and it might be very difficult, and it may have been said in a way that was perhaps, a bit challenging, but then ultimately it's a very efficient or effective piece of feedback,
Ah,
and it's actually probably demonstrating part of your shadow that needs to be looked at and examined and ultimately integrated, really.
yeah.
You don't have to like it,
Yeah.
but accepting it and
Mm.
owning it, I think, is key.
Yes, that
Yeah.
goes back to reconnecting to all the parts of us, right? Kind of being whole, that whole, that sense of wholeness again.
Yeah.
Yes, that's very clear to me. Thank you for saying that, because yeah, that pushing away says something. That's a part of me that's trying to push away. That part in me is actually that part
Mm.
has been denied, and that I was not allowed to get angry when I was little because I had been abused when I was a child. So the body
Oh,
probably still holds some of that. So it's
yeah.
interesting to see. And then it's a reminder of that, the violence and yeah. Gosh, and you said beautifully earlier about complexity. We are very complex
Mm.
humans, right? We go because there are all
Yeah.
these parts. We have the intellect with this beautiful vision, which I have all my spiritual, let's say, realizations, even knowledge of
Yeah.
truth, and then I have the mind that can judge, right, push away things, and then the body that has stored some trauma that I'm not aware of. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just so much happening that we are not even,
We're
we are
absolutely.
definitely not aware of most of these, yeah, dynamics,
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
happening here. So it's amazing how we can actually have a conversation about these things, in a linear
Yeah.
way, in a clear way. So I love clarity. I'm not always that clear, especially when it comes to this, the body, what it's
Mm.
doing, and content of the mind, past, all, because I prefer to be in the moment and kind of be here and
Mm.
focus more on what's present. But so clarity definitely cannot, for me, is just not, it doesn't come from those areas, the body mind. It's more from, yeah,
Mm.
it's coming through the body mind, but from a different place, more silent place. It's more like
Yeah. I love
being,
that.
yeah, hearing the silence. I love that,
Oh,
timeless, non-linear, and just, yeah, it's quite beautiful. Um,
yeah.
Gosh, so thank you so much for your beautiful presence and for the
Thank
work that
you.
you're doing. Yeah, the contribution to well-being. That's really the
Mm.
vision I see here for this, for humanity, that we can come to the understanding that we can become whole, even
Yeah.
if it is from the place of silence that I just mentioned, the spiritual place that
Mm.
sees everything as wholeness, as one anyway. But I love the work that you do in therapists. It's just so beautiful to
Thank you.
see, yeah, people doing the heal. It's a very courageous work, really. Trying to
Mm.
integrate these parts and work with them. It's not easy, so it's very courageous. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for being the doorway uh,
Ah,
to that, yeah, to that
thank
realm.
you. Yeah.
So I want to mention your services, couples counseling. That's do you offer services online and in person, Julia, or just
Yes,
in person?
absolutely.
Both.
Yeah, online and in person. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Do you also are you open to groups, working with, yeah, more
Uh, at
couple?
this stage, I mostly just work with couples. So, although I will be training in family therapy soon, so
Yeah,
in future I'll be able to
yeah,
work with families, which will
yeah.
be a very interesting
Mm.
and dynamic experience, I'm sure. So,
Yes,
yeah,
yeah. Wow,
Yeah.
congratulations. And that's
Thank you.
yeah, that sounds like even more fun when it comes to
More
healing.
dynamic.
Yeah,
Yeah,
healing
more
beyond.
complexity. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So your website is flourishrelationship.com. I love the
Yeah.
name too, Flourish. There's something about this name. It reminds me of
Yeah.
flowers, like blossoming. I
Yeah.
don't know. There's something about flower and flourish that I put it together. But flourishrelationships.com, it will be clickable on the podcast notes. Before we say goodbye for today, Julia, is there anything that you left unsaid for today's conversation?
Oh,
Yeah.
probably dangerous to ask me that as we're trying to close off.
Right.
Um, no, I mean, I just think that,
Yeah.
as I've sort of been mentioning throughout the podcast, we are incredibly relational beings. We
Mm.
are built for relationships.
Yeah.
We're built to be in relationship with each
Mm.
other, in communities,
Yeah.
in family groups. We're not meant to travel alone in this life. And relationships can be an amazing source of love and comfort and safety,
Yeah.
but they can also be an amazing tool, as
Yes.
we've been talking about in terms of self growth, healing, and
Yeah.
just transformation. So I just see it as one of the most important experiences, or one of the most important elements of being human.
Me too. Yes, me
Yeah.
too. Thank you for saying that, for confirming that. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, a billion
Mm.
times. So my last question for you is about freedom. This platform is titled The Freedom to Feel.
Yeah.
So what is freedom from your perspective?
Oh, wow. Freedom, I think, for me, probably would be uh, not being controlled by
Mm.
relational patterns and
Yes.
our triggers and responses to things. I mean, I think we're
Mm.
always going to
Yeah.
perhaps maybe feel the sting of a certain trigger in our life, but
Yeah.
for it not to completely take over and
Mm.
dictate our
Yeah.
thoughts, feelings, and behaviors,
Mm.
and to not be afraid of
Yeah.
patterns and triggers. I think that's ultimately freedom. And
Yes.
whether that be relationship patterns or inherited family
Mm.
patterns, all of those things,
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's ultimately what freedom is about in this lifetime.
Yeah. Yes. So you spoke to me directly, but probably a lot
Oh,
of, I mean, pretty much everybody.
yeah,
Hopefully not
yeah,
everybody, but a good number of people. So
yeah.
thank you so much again for your beautiful
Thank
presence.
you. Thank
And
you for your work.
yeah, and we'll talk again. We'll be in touch again. Bye for now, Julia. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Bye.